Welcome to the One Gang Worldwide podcast, your ultimate ride into the world of motorcycles. Visit cyclesworldwide.com where we offer a completely free marketplace for everything motorcycles. Join our One Gang community where you can connect, share info, and swap stories with riders from all over the world. Join for free at cyclesworldwide.com and be a part of the One Gang community right now.
Today we've got Tom Lewellyn, the founder of Coexlion, a motorcycle engineering consulting company with a powerful mission behind the name. This episode delves into the balancing act of integrating traditional engineering with cutting-edge tech, shedding light on current and future trends in the motorcycle industry. Tom also offers valuable insights into the startup ecosystem, the importance of fostering innovation, and the evolving landscape of electric motorcycles.
We were always trying to instigate skunk work projects of, making like a electric Grom type thing out of stripping the bodywork off the scooters that existed. And so we were always trying to find those spaces to do that innovation, but we always felt that it wasn't within the mindset of the big corporates.
One Gang Worldwide podcast, brought to you by Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping. Since 1978, Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping has been the trusted name in transporting motorcycles safely across the country. With custom designed pallets and air ride trailers, your bike is secure and protected every step of the way. By choosing Keyboard Motorcycle Shipping, you're supporting a dedicated small business that prioritizes quality and customer satisfaction. Ship with a peace of mind, knowing your motorcycle is in expert hands.
Please visit shippingmymotorcycle.com. That's shippingmymotorcycle.com. And now, back to our show.
Hey, One Gang, welcome to the show. We've got Tom Lewellyn of Coexlion with us today. We're excited to have you. Thank you for joining us, Tom. We appreciate it.
Yeah, nice to be here. Thank you.
Tom, thanks for joining us, man, from the UK, buddy. Appreciate you taking the time. Like we do all our shows, let's start it from the beginning. Where did you grow up? What kind of kid were you at a young age?
I suppose I want to say the truth here. Probably pain in the backside, but I grew up in sort of south side of London, near Woking. Always been into cars and stuff, Woking, the home of the McLaren F1 team, so I followed them from a young age, and nice. I kind of dreamt about maybe one day working on that as I grew up.
That's cool. Was your family kind of like, was your dad a motorhead? Did he enjoy tinkering in the garage?
To be fair,
my dad, like
I think my mum and dad recognised that the best way to get me to sit still and be quiet was to sit me in front of the TV, in front of some bike racing or car racing or something, and that would give them at least sort of half an hour's peace. So they kind of encouraged it. My dad was more into football, and sailing was kind of his sports. But he was really good. I think he could see the passion in cars and wanting to go fast. So from when I was a teenager, he used to take me to the racetracks and watch the racing there, which was really sort of piqued my interest in wanting to get into engineering and making stuff go fast. I always had plans of getting things like chainsaw motors or petrol lawnmower motors and somehow fixing it to my bike to make it go faster and stuff like that. I luckily didn't make any of these projects really happen. But yeah, I had all these ideas, loads of drawings, a file at home with all these. If I could just get this motor and attach it to this thing with wheels, it would be really fast. So awesome. Yeah, it was good. So I don't think passion came from my dad, but he was kind of encouraged me to do stuff that was, I guess, less destructive and gave some peace and quiet.
Right on. So you remember your first real taste of engineering / motorsports? Was there a moment where you kind of realized this is what I want to do?
I don't know if there was that like eureka moment, because as far as I can remember, it was like watching, we had a TV program in the UK called Grandstand, which used to show, to show loads of different sports, and like throughout the day, just dip in and out of different things. But whenever the racing was on, that's when, like my mum would say, look, the racing's on, go and sit and watch that. So it was like always on, always in the background, and always liked it. Obviously, as a young kid, I wanted to be a racing driver. I wanted to be driving those cars. But I think as I got older, reading the magazines, like Autosport magazine in the UK, would cover what happened in the racing. And they had then technical sections. I think more and more I got into reading that technical section and really being fascinated as to actually how they make these things go so fast and do what they do. So I think
That's
it
where the engineering
wasn't like
came
a
in.
switch moment. It was more like a transition from, wow, racing cars is cool, to then actually the tech behind these cars is really, really cool. And that's why I wanted to do automotive engineering college, was because I wanted to get into doing that properly when I graduated. So that was,
Cool.
it was more of a evolution than a one moment switch that says, yeah, this is what I want to do.
Well, that's
You were
interesting.
indoctrinated.
That's right.
Yeah.
How did the early education and training set you up for the hands-on work that you're doing now? And did you go more down the academic road of learning about this, or more like boots on the ground, where you're doing a lot more hands-on?
I think a bit of both, which I personally think is quite important. So when we're looking to recruit people to our company, we are looking for a bit of both. Obviously, you need to have some academic background in the core subjects, but it really stands out to us for people who have got their hands dirty and wanted to get involved with that. So before going to college, I got my own car, an old Mini, and my friend also had a
Nice.
Mini, and we'd just forever be tinkering, upgrading them, changing like the brake system, larger engines, different cylinder heads. I'm not sure how much of it was covered on the.
What's up, One Gang? I used to think that if I spent big money on riding gear with a logo on the back, I was getting top quality. I gave Leather Up a shot. I wasn't sure at first, could I really get quality gear without spending a fortune? But after putting tens of thousands of miles on their jackets and vests, I had my answer. No busted zippers, no loose stitching, just solid, well-made gear that lasts. Leather Up carries trusted brands like Milwaukee Leather, Hot Leathers, and more, with gear for every rider and every budget. Plus, their customer service actually cares and picks up the phone, something rare these days. So do yourself a favor, check out leatherup.com. Whether you need jackets, vests, chaps, boots, helmets, or luggage, they've got you covered. And because you're part of the One Gang Worldwide family, use code CW20 at checkout for 20% off your entire order. Stop overpaying, gear up with Leather Up, and see the difference yourself.
Insurance, but we'd be sort of getting involved in that. So I was sort of self-taught a mechanics perspective by
That's cool.
taking engines in and out of cars. And then at college, I opted to do the Formula Student program, which I think is Formula SAE in the States, where you build a race car. We build it with a bike engine to compete against other colleges. And it was
awesome.
quite new when I was at college. So back in early 2000s, I think we were the only third year that our college had entered. But that allowed us to design and build and then run a like little race car. And that for me taught me probably as much doing that for a year as the academic content from the uni for the other 3
for
years,
sure.
because it really applies what you're learning to something.
Yeah, for sure. Hands on. In between that time frame of growing up as a young guy and through the college part, was there any time where you had motorcycles, your own physical bike, or were you strictly car minded?
Yeah, so I appreciate this is a bike podcast, so maybe I shouldn't.
No, it's
but,
okay.
When
It's okay.
when I had a superficial interest in bikes growing up, because loved watching bike racing on telly as much as the car racing, but I wouldn't have described myself as a bike guy. What turned it around for me was a guy, Gavin Hardman, name check him, still a friend of mine. He was a year above me at college, and he'd done an industrial placement year, like a year-long internship with Triumph Motorcycles. And because he was a friend of mine, I was getting feedback from him saying that it was a really good internship, like he was getting really good exposure to do this kind of design work. And to be honest, I hadn't thought to look at Triumph because I didn't think I was a bike guy. But he said, look, you don't need to be a bike guy when you go there. They'll teach you about bikes. You just need to be interested in the engineering. And so it's because of Gavin, I thought, well, do you know what? I will apply for Triumph. So I applied for Triumph. I also wrote a letter to every single race team based in the UK, every single one. I got a couple of responses and one interview with one race team, but I didn't manage to get into a race team, which would have been my primary choice. It's like the reason why I went to college. But then I thought, do you know what? Rather than going to an OEM car company, a motorbike company is closer to the kind of pure performance that you get from a race team. So, and I'd had that feedback from Gavin that it was a really good placement year. So that's when I sort of became interested in a big way in bikes, was to apply for the Triumph course. And I remember going up the road, it's only about 20 miles from where I was at college, up the road for the interview. And the guys on my course who were really into bikes just giving me a crash course on motorbikes, saying like Japanese 4-cylinder, Triumph make the 3-cylinder. Then you got these twins. And I'm like trying to remember everything, like as if I was going to get a hardcore motorcycle test when I went there. Yeah, but that was the moment for me. And it was really, I probably wouldn't have thought of it. The UK bike industry at the time wasn't massively strong as well. So you're not thinking, I want to make a career as a bike engineer. That came whilst I was working at Triumph. But yeah, that was the moment really that I thought, there's an option here on two wheels.
Yeah. How many race teams do you think you reached out to?
Oh my gosh, like all of them, not just the
Ballpark.
big name touring car ones, probably 30 or so. So like all the Formula One teams based in the UK, but also the GT teams, rally teams, the saloon car racing teams. And probably about 25% responded to just sort of acknowledge the application, which say that they didn't have anything. And then I got through to an interview for one. And I remember it because it was a saloon car racing team that did Le Mans as well. And I used to go and watch the races with my dad. And when I went to their headquarters, walking up the stairs, I was seeing trophies from the races that I'd watched. And I was a little bit like starstruck. And then we did a practical exercise, and the guy who came in to sort of set up this sort of practical exercise for us was the British champion. And I'd seen him racing. I was like, I can't believe this guy's doing our interview. And I think at that point, my brain just sort of drained out of my head. I wasn't able to do anything proper, but it was a great experience to do that.
That's awesome. Great story.
That sounds incredible. So then moving forward, you spent 15 years at Triumph, from design project engineer to design team lead and chassis engineer. Take us into what that was like working with one of the best motorcycle companies in the world and some of the major innovations that you were a part of.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it was a real dream job, especially at the time that I joined the company. We were 60 engineers in design. I think it had been established, really reborn only about 10 years earlier, so relatively in the growth phase still. And I think it gave me a fantastic opportunity to grow with the company. So not only improving my skills as an engineer, but also see that transition from a kind of plucky, almost startup trying to compete with the Japanese to actually a properly established OEM. We did a lot of work around developing processes and procedures, that kind of less sexy stuff, but a lot of actually cementing what made us good and made us compete. And I think it gave me a really good mindset into how to make an innovative project. Perhaps when you're at college, you think, I'm going to make something brand new. That's the way to win. Sure. Everything has to be groundbreaking and new. But the Triumph approach was more pragmatic because we're a smaller company with less resources than, say, Honda or Yamaha. We weren't going to be the company that came up with the first dual clutch transmission or the first LED headlight, because we didn't have the resource to do that. But what we recognized was we were fast followers, and all we had to do was make our solution 5% better than what somebody else has done to beat them overall. And you only needed to be better in maybe one or two key areas. You couldn't be worse. You couldn't make a product that was like, the chassis crap, but the engine's good. But you didn't need to be better on chassis and better on engine. You could say, we're going to match them on this, and then we would strategically decide for different projects in the different range, in different areas, but this is how we're going to beat them. So we're going to match them here, and in one area we'll try and beat them rather than beat them everywhere. And I think that made it a more achievable challenge and made us deliver projects where we would have maybe 10 engineers working on a whole bike, where we knew that like Honda, Yamaha would have 100. So we're with much less resource managing to take on the mammoth, like the giants of the industry, and give a product that people genuinely loved and would prefer. I mean, a huge respect for the Japanese engineering companies, because I think what they do is really good, and for them to come in and compete in the European, British, American bike markets, I think is really good. But there was some aspect of the soul missing from some of those products. Like a Honda is technically brilliant, but somehow almost too good, a little bit too rounded. Therefore, for some people, it's absolutely the right solution. But for other people, there was that little special something that they were looking for. And that was where we could compete and in a crowded space in the market to grow the brand. And so I think being on that journey, rather than joining a big established company and fitting into a sort of running machine, joining as part of that growth phase and growing with the company was a fantastic learning experience for me, for which I'm really grateful for, and a lot of fun. And other people who've been through Triumph at a similar time to me said that the highlight was working with a group of people that had the same mindset, all very hardworking, all, quite motivated, quite bright, being able to push things forwards with the really quite a high efficiency of thought. That was the main sort of feeling behind it, was what you had to do, had to make a positive difference, or it was a waste of time and couldn't be afforded, couldn't be done. So we were very focused.
Sometimes having a smaller team like that can actually work to your advantage. Some of those differences you had at Triumph, I'm sure, worked out for the better.
Yeah, absolutely.
Absolutely, for your personal career too.
Yeah, and we were very pared back in terms of other OEMs that my friends have been to or I've worked in with. There's quite a thick layer of management with people checking progress, making presentations, and ultimately they have to get their data from the engineers, so that then takes up the engineers' time and slows them down. We were beautifully free of that at Triumph in those sort of formative years. We were just given a target and we were left to get on with it, and we were pushed hard to make sure that it happened, but we weren't covered in bureaucracy that sort of slowed us down or tied our hands to do it. We were just able to get on with it, and working with some fantastic development riders and that would really add that like special DNA into the projects was really good.
Tom, wanted to ask you a question, man. I love US bikes. Obviously the Harley Davidson world is where I know, but the Triumph world I've always loved. I give props where props is due in regards to German and Japanese engineering. They're obviously above and beyond everybody else. Everybody kind of takes their steps and puts it and implements it into their brands. But I did want to ask you this. You were saying, like, just kind of piggybacking a little bit off of Ben's question. You were saying that what you guys tried to do was make it 5% better, right, than what it was in the way you received it or the way you found it. What was Triumph really known for as far as being kind of the leaders of the motorsport side, or where did they advance above others, in your opinion?
Well, so I'm from the chassis team, so my background would say chassis, so I'd have to say that, but that's probably a bit biased. But I think if I start with the engine first, on the engines, the triple character and the parallel twins, I think were something that we owned. We could be authentic doing that. So Kawasaki could make a parallel twin and it would be good, but it wouldn't be a Triumph parallel twin.
Agreed.
And I think we learned maybe the hard way that if we try to make too much of a copy product for someone else, if we tried to take on Harley with a cruiser, we weren't going to win. Like, we're not authentic. We can't beat that. But where we could was to have a character that was uniquely Triumph by making parallel twins. So the Bonneville did way better in America than any of the cruiser versions of the Bonneville that were deliberately made for America, because we're trying to sell them something they've already got a good solution for, which is a Harley or a Victory. If you want something different, you've already got that product area covered. But if you give them something that no one else can offer that's not authentic, then people will buy a second bike that's a Triumph because they've already got a cruiser and then they want something else from their second bike. So I think it's a lot more success for sticking to what's authentically Triumph in a space that we own. So the engine character was a lot of that. But then, as I said, from a chassis point of view, I think the ride and handling development that was done Triumph was really good. And I think that was an area we could often excel. And I think it's also a good area for a company like Triumph to try and take on the competition, because you don't need to spend more money on components and materials. You just need to arrange them in a better way. And that's free from a development cost. point of view. You're just relying on the skills of the test team. And I think partly this lean management program, structure, allowed us to put things like rider experience and rider handling ahead of internal things like the milestones, etc. And we had, I would say, what would be regarded as an agile development phase way before it was fashionable, when other companies were working through gate reviews and saying, well, this has to all be fixed, then this fixed, then this fixed. We would have a lot more parallel development. And so we would fix things like ergonomics and the final geometry of the bike and the final suspension settings very late in a project compared to a normal automotive program, because we were constantly refining. So we would start very early with a very adjustable mule so that we could fully optimize what the kind of North Star for the project had to be in terms of weight distribution and suspension settings. And then at every build phase, we would refer back to that. And if we weren't matching what that would have to be, then we would make changes. We wouldn't say, well, project deadlines means this is fixed. We'd keep moving it. And on some projects, that was huge decisions like moving the engine in the layout on the Daytona development. Not a project I was directly involved in, so I don't want to take any credit, but obviously a hugely successful chassis on the Daytona 675 engine as it was. In the development of that project, they made the decision to move the engine within the chassis to change the weight distribution to make the bike handle better, which is massive disruption to your project timelines and your progress. But if you carried on taking this is what we've set and this is what the project milestones require, you'd have ended up with a product that didn't handle best in class. So what's the point? So it was decisions like that, like major decisions on the Tiger 1200 where engine crank inertia was affecting the handling. So completely went back and looked at how the inertia of the crank could be reduced to make the bike more agile. So they didn't shy away from getting in there and making big changes to make the product deliver on its potential, rather than saying, well, we made the wrong decision at the concept phase, but we're now committed to it and will deliver, which is, I think, when you have a more management heavy process that can maybe restrict you. So you're perhaps not on the optimum path, but you're on the path that will get you to the end with least resistance and pain. So you end up following that, even though it's compromising the product. And I think at Triumph, we were very good at being an advocate for the customer and the end product and making the tricky decisions when they needed to be made.
That's awesome. Thanks for answering. And that was great detailed information into that. All right, you're done with Triumph, 15 years there. Walk us through the time, your time with Hero MotoCorp. I mean, that's a huge name in the two-wheeler space, obviously. What kind of work were you doing there, and what did you take away from that experience?
Well, for me, it was a unique opportunity because although a well-established company, biggest manufacturer by volume in India, huge revenue coming in, so well-established in those terms, and built on the basis of a joint venture with Honda. In 2010, they had separated from Honda. So actually, in terms of running their own R&D, it was a very young company, only 5 years old. And so what they were at the end of 2015, when I joined, where they were in that journey was trying to develop a world-class international R&D team so that they could step outside of their traditional or where they were restricted to in sales with India. When it was a joint venture with Honda, they could only sell in the Indian region. And then they were looking global, looking at using that manufacturing base to make products for the world in the same way as some Chinese manufacturers were doing. And in fact, same way that other Indian manufacturers were doing. So when I joined in 2015, what tempted me to join was when we went on the look and see trip, and they were building a dedicated R&D center on a greenfield site just outside of Jaipur in north of India. And it was the bike engineers, bike designers' dream, because everything you need to develop a motorcycle was there on that site. So we had 16 kilometers of test tracks, including like a handling circuit, a high-speed bowl, straight line drag strips, and everything you can imagine was all there, all floodlit, so you could use it 24/7 if you wanted to.
Nice.
And then they had a prototyping facility there, which could manufacture everything except for tires. I think tires was the only thing you'd have to buy in, but they could cast prototype crankcases in-house in the R&D center. So
Wow.
if you could think it up, you could make it there. They're installing like a little mini assembly line so that you could build the bikes in the same way they were built in assembly, and really tried it through. So all of the sort of perhaps struggles for resource, thinking, we're competing with Honda and their massive resource, part of a car company. So a lot of the other four-wheeler companies, Suzuki, Kawasaki, Honda, BMW, they all have resource from four-wheeler companies that they can draw on. And then to see the investment at Hero and the facilities we were going to have available, it was a kind of like a dream to go there and to work in that environment, brand new facility, purpose made for developing bikes. And it was a great learning experience for me because, as I said, Triumph was great. I loved it, but it was quite insular in the industry. It was no other big bike companies in the UK at the time. So it was just Triumph. And we were a little bit disconnected from the European bike design scene. But then when I went to Hero, I was working alongside engineers from Honda, Yamaha, Piaggio Group, BMW, Motorrad, Peugeot.
Yes.
So we had, and a lot of these guys had moved around multiple European companies as well. So suddenly I knew only the Triumph way of doing things, and there was pros and cons of how we developed it. We're then in an environment where you're working with most of the global manufacturers represented, with quite senior guys there. And it gave an opportunity to kind of cherry pick and learn from their experience and see, well, what did they do better? What did we do better? And at that early stage of the R&D journey at Hero, what do we want the Hero way to be? How do we want to, everyone thinks their way of developing a bike is best. But if every department works as per a different OEM, it's going to be chaos. So we've got to kind of come together and say, okay, this is one way of doing it. This is another way. We could choose a third way of doing this that maybe suits us better, and try and develop. So it was the motivation to go there was a new challenge, something sort of outside of my comfort zone. And I'm really glad I did, because it just really opened up my eyes to the whole world of motorcycle engineering rather than just the kind of Triumph space.
That's awesome. You had mentioned that like you had engineers from all different companies that had worked, like you had the Japanese, you had the German, so on and so on, the English bikes. What did you find as far as, because everybody kind of brought their own pieces to the table, right? You have all these different minds that have worked with different brands. Did you find one worked better than the other? Did it seem like more the Japanese stuff was a little bit more fluent and better wise for the long term, or was it just a mishmash of everybody putting important input in that worked from all facets to make it better?
I think there's pros and cons of different approaches, and what's quite remarkable was the length of time it would take companies typically to do new bikes. I think ranging from 7 years to the likes of sort of Honda and BMW from the early inception, because they're trying to develop a lot of new technology along that, down to like 18 months for like some of the other companies which are moving much more quickly. So we're trying to understand, how do we get the quality and the innovation of these companies that are taking longer, but in the shorter amount of time that some of the other companies are doing. And I think also we should mention that in that mix, there was also a great bunch of really experienced Indian engineers that really would understand the needs of the Indian market as well, and how that was different. So it's all well and good at us saying, well, this is what Honda needs, but Honda's dealing with a very different supplier base and customer in Japan than we're dealing with in India, with the Indian domestic suppliers and customers. So there was also an element of what was right for those companies is maybe not right for Hero and India as well. So we had to try and find this third way, which went on them. So I'd say traditionally, which you would probably recognize, is that the Japanese are very meticulous, very process driven, very thorough, quite inflexible. So sometimes it'd be difficult to kind of course correct if you've set a path that's maybe not quite right, or you want to develop something away from what you've tried and tested, because there'd be a tendency to say, well, this is how we do it and we know it works, so we want to do this. But what we want to do is, from the other end of it, not be too chaotic and not have any kind of structure and then take too many risks or change too many things at once and then don't really understand why it's not working. So I believe in compromise, and I think it was that trying to bring everyone together and find this new way that worked for Hero rather than saying it was right. And to be honest, like for me to arrogantly say, oh, the Triumph way is best, we should do it like this. Triumph was making, I think, 50,000 bikes a year when I left, and Hero was making 6 million a year. So what worked at Triumph probably wouldn't work for Hero because of the volumes you're talking about, the amount of time it takes to build up to those volumes. So you're trying to identify what the things we should keep, the things we should throw away, and how we should introduce that.
6 million a year. Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I know.
Wild.
That is a lot.
It's crazy numbers. Yep.
So speaking of India, after you, I want to hear about this more.
Yeah, I just said that the volumes were incredible. So there was 7 manufacturing plants, and just out of one plant, they would make a year's worth of Triumph production of one model could be made in a week out of one of the plants. The volume was so high. So yeah, the focus was really on speed of assembly and repeatability of that process. It couldn't be sort of handcrafted and carefully adjusted to make it okay, because you're just not going to make the volume like that. It's got to work right every time, and you've got to be able to make them really, really quick. So different priorities. And just because the bikes were lower cost didn't make them less of a technical challenge. You are optimizing them in the same way you're optimizing a performance bike. You're just optimizing them against different criteria. But yeah, still a really big technical challenge.
Man. So speaking of India, you went from traditional petrol-powered bikes to being at the forefront of India's EV revolution with Ola Electric, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So what was that shift like?
Yeah, it was very different, very different. So I'd say Triumph was a small OEM and it was quite dynamic. And I thought, having them been a Hero, a large OEM, that maybe I fancied going back to something a bit more dynamic, a bit more like Triumph. Very early stage of going to Ola, good chance to sort of build that up with completely no legacy or history there. But I learned that working in a startup is very different from working with a small OEM like Triumph. It was very dynamic.
What were some of those big learning curves specifically?
Just some of the challenges that you face, which you take for granted, things like having computers and CAD licenses, for example. And we were pushed to build up that team, and it's like, okay, focus on recruit, get 40 people in, and then you get 40 people in, and then you've got to source 40 laptops. And it sounds like, well, okay, you can go out and buy 40 laptops, but during COVID, which is what happened during that, it's not so easy to go out and get 40 laptops. There's all of the supply chains all messed up. So just those things like that, the easy stuff that just happens in the background because the rest of the company is really well established. There's nothing else around you. You're kind of on your own and you're like, okay, we just need to do this. It's like, oh, that system doesn't work or that process doesn't work. Like, oh, I just need to go and test this. No problem. I use an external test house. Or we don't have any contracts with test houses. So you've got to find a test house and negotiate it, get those deals done. So you're trying to move really fast because you don't have infinite cash runway, but then every step requires more work than you're used to from the OEM side. And from a company with no legacy of making vehicles, how to make a decision and what to prioritize becomes less easy. So you know what your brand DNA is from Triumph. So you know what you need to do, what option to take to be a Triumph in that market. And to the same extent with Hero, you know the same. But when it's a completely new company like an Ola, where they haven't made a product yet, what does it stand for? Are we trying to be the cheapest bike? Are we trying to be more premium quality? Are we trying to sell this on performance, or are we trying to sell it on comfort? So the kind of basis of which you'd make the decisions isn't there either. So you've got to build a framework under which you can make those decisions too. And then, of course, the desire to move really, really fast. I think the comfort of, if you're designing the new Daytona, no one's going to be happy if you delay the launch by 6 months. But in reality, if you delay the launch, they'll keep selling the old Daytona just fine. There's an income stream.
Right.
But if you are a startup and you're launching product number one and you've delayed it for 6 months, who's paying your bills for the extra 6 months? Where's that money coming from? There's a real finite runway. And yes, you can go back to the investors, but at some point the investors are going to say, well, we need to see something and we need to see a potential return. So
Sure.
It adds up the stress and tension behind those sort of timing and progress meetings, because you've got to get, you're more constrained by that time.
Yeah. Right.
What was your before I go to the next one, what was your gut feeling walking into this, coming from two big companies like you were at, and you took this chance, and what was your gut coming in? Was this something like more of the fact that you wanted to kind of be on the forefront of this thing, or use it as a more of a challenge to see and learn more regarding the industry and how to grow this brand?
I think it's a bit of a both. I think part of it is when you're dealing with a big company, you have less influence on some things like manufacturing processes or supply chain. It's just natural that you're not going to be so involved. Tempting to join a startup and being part of that senior leadership team, because you have a stronger influence on that. So you feel like we can set this off on the right footing, and maybe some of those legacy issues that are very difficult to change, you don't need to be restricted by those, so you can make that happen. And I think also the attitude of the CEO, Bhavesh, was very much from the same school, I think, of Elon Musk, which is, nothing is impossible.
Awesome.
If we look at this a different way, the problems look different. So I think he was quite heavily influenced by that, and that was quite exciting prospect to work in that kind of environment, as opposed to a very manufacturing-led large company, which is, well, this is the way we always do it.
Right.
And you're like, there's other ways to do this, which would be much more efficient, but that default, but this has worked for 30 years, so this is what we're going to do, could sometimes be a bit frustrating. So it was a case to sort of escape that in an extreme way. So I think was the temptation, and also a chance to be part of the solution. So moving to the electric vehicles, I think when you lived in big urban areas in India, there is pollution issues, and you feel like actually electric scooters really make sense in urban areas. Less noisy, less pollution. You're not doing long rides, so the range issue isn't so much of a problem. You can always charge at home or the office, so range anxiety is not a problem. So actually it's a really good fit to the use case. And so that felt exciting to be, like I say, part of motorbikes being the good guys rather than the bad guys, as we've sometimes seen, or sitting outside of what good transport infrastructure should look like. Actually, this is perfect, reduces traffic, reduces pollution, it's affordable, getting people on personal transport away from public transport. It opens up economic opportunities for them. So I think being all part of that was also quite motivating as well. But
Right.
I'd say the biggest motivation for me was joining something right at the beginning, as you have a real chance, again, to grow with it and to establish it in a way that that you want.
And I mean, you're talking about as true of a hands-on experience in the EV side coming into it as you can possibly get. It's a true startup, so you're learning and building from the beginning, which kind of takes us into your next stint with ARC vehicle, very cutting edge, almost futuristic design in the EV. I had a chance to speak with Mark. We never had him on the show, but I had a chance to speak with him on the phone for a while. We chatted. This was last year. I mean, people aren't familiar with ARC. They're no longer in business, obviously, but he designed what is, the future of the EV, sport bike, performance, everything. And, he had a hefty price tag. What was the vision there, and how did your role fit into it when you took this position with ARC to push that envelope with them? What was this? Like, let me ask you a two-part question. What was the vision walking in when you guys were all sitting together, designing this, putting this together? And two is, why do you think it didn't work?
Yeah. Okay. So the vision from the product, from how I understand it, is putting that desirability into electric bikes. So as I say, electric scooters at the low end of the market really makes sense. There's a customer pull because it's solving a problem. But traditionally, when we look at a high power electric bike, yes, there's a few people that really want to make a statement. They want that environmental friendliness, but they don't want to abandon the performance of that bike. But we felt there wasn't enough desirability in those products. They were quite quirky. You're looking for unique individuals who want that. What about those guys that really love their bike? You know, the way that it looks, the way that it feels when they're riding it. Maybe not in terms of riding coast to coast, doing a long trip, or really using it as a tool, but something that you love owning, and you just look at it. You want to park it in your lounge at home because you want to look at it. It's so passionate.
Right.
We wanted to bring
Some
of that passion, into that product. Have a real desirable product that, yes, it would have to perform. It has to back up the way that it has to look, but the primary function of the vehicle is that kind of desire. So can we make the electric vehicles truly desirable? Now, obviously, the ARC team had done a load of great work to start with, and they'd established, I'd say, the concept of the project and had it working. But unfortunately, COVID derailed the first iteration of ARC. I believe the investment didn't come through because people pulling back because of COVID uncertainty. So at the time I joined, post-COVID, the ARC was coming sort of the phoenix from the flames. There'd been a management buyout and they were coming back. And really what we were trying to do is organise where we'd got to. So how mature the engineering got, where did we need to do more work, where did we need to productionise it? It was always going to be low volume, but where did we need to make sure that it was more repeatable, and then get that validation testing done so that we could give bikes to customers. The first customer was Ryan Reynolds, so there was quite a lot of pressure to make sure that the first bike worked well. So that was sort of my involvement, was helping pull that all back together, stake in the ground. Where had we got to? What do we need to do to get it to that level that we can move forwards? Where did it go wrong? So I think it's a typical problem that you have for companies as they scale up. You need to invest a lot of money on materials and equipment in order to build the bikes that you need to sell. You can try and pre-sell as many products as possible, but I think that's difficult with such a high value product that people want to see that it's available before they cough up the money. So I think it's a classic cash flow situation. I don't know the exact ins and outs of it, but I think there was a number of pre-orders that were made, but then when it came to actually pay for the bikes and make it happen, it didn't happen. But then all the material costs have to be committed, and so typical cash flow for the business. I think what's behind why that was hard, why was it hard to sell those bikes? Because I still think you're selling into a niche. I still think big electric bikes, maybe the world's not quite ready, or the technology's not quite ready, because in order to have meaningful performance or range to match what we love about big bikes across the globe, you need to have a really big battery, and then a really big battery is very expensive and heavy, and it takes away from part of that performance and part of that feeling. So I think big electric bikes are still a little bit limited by the available battery technology because of the cost and the size and the mass. The use cases where electric bikes really make sense are where you don't need massive power or a long duration of riding, be it in time or distance. If you can keep the battery small because you're looking for a short burst of performance like an electric trials bike or off-road bike, then that works really well. If you're happy you're making short journeys like 20 kilometers to work, then that also works. But when you're trying to have more than one of those things, you want decent range, you want decent performance, and you want to ride it for more than 15 minutes between charges.
Right.
It's a challenge. So I wouldn't say you're selling a flawed product, but I think you're hard to tick those boxes, which you need to tick all three of those if you're going to get people off their petrol bike onto an electric bike. So I think the technology is evolving all the time. I think there's amazing new battery cell technology that seems to be speeding up charge time, discharge rates, like by a factor of 10, like every couple of years. So I think the technology is moving towards the market. And then if there is any movement the other way in terms of legislation or the cost of petrol going up, then I think there will be a crossover point where big electric bikes does make sense. But I think we're not quite there yet.
Right.
I think it's a bit early for that.
Yeah. Cool.
Graphene is one of those interesting topics in battery tech that I've been tracking along with. There's lots of innovation happening. It's just a couple years off, you know.
Absolutely. So I think people
let's
are
get
doing
to
it in the lab, but putting it into a product, it's not quite there yet.
It's a ways
or
off.
The costs are too high.
Sure. I want to get into the juicy bits. So fast forward a little bit and you decided to found Coexlion. What was the moment that made you decide, hey, I want to build something of my own?
Actually, the idea came, perhaps it's always been there. Working at Hero, we worked with a number of outsourcing agencies, typically European companies that would support for concept generation or to support on some models. When we were doing like 90 new models at Hero at the time, so it was not possible to do it all in-house anyway. So we were working with some overseas. And then similarly, when we were working at Ola, there was a sort of strong push from the investors and from the management that we should connect maybe with some overseas engineering teams outside of India. And actually the Ola product was built on the basis of the Etigo scooter, which was an acquisition. It was a Dutch company. So there was this kind of underlying feeling I would say in the management and in investors that to do ground up new design in India, you needed to maybe start outside of India, and then India would do the industrialization and the productionalization of that. But I actually, and along with some of my colleagues and my co-founder Kalyan, we felt this wasn't necessarily the case. I think the reason why perhaps we weren't doing so well or hadn't done so well in the past at doing ground up new design in India wasn't the talent of the engineers or the ability to innovate. It was more the management culture around that, more sort of target driven and timeline dictated. You need to give me a bike layout by next week and then we'll do this. That's not a good environment with which to innovate. That kind of, what if we change this? What if we do that? That kind of experimental stage where you see if it's better. Oh no, it's not, it's worse. Scrap that, let's do something else. That space, freedom to innovate, didn't really exist within the corporate structure of heavily manufacturing oriented companies. So the idea at first was myself and Kalyan, who worked with me at Hero, and then when I went to Ola, he came to Ola with me as well. She had gone to Ather, another Indian startup prior to that, and when I joined Ola, I pulled him across again. And what we always sort of dreamed about was setting up a skunk works where we could experiment with the current products and try to improve them or make quirky things, like the way that the Speed Triple at Triumph was born out of taking a fairing off a sports bike and different handlebars on there, making a new product with what we had around. We were always trying to instigate skunk work projects of, making like a electric grom type thing out of stripping the bodywork off the scooters that existed. And so we were always trying to find those spaces to do that innovation, but we always felt that it wasn't within the mindset of the big corporates. So it wasn't that you couldn't innovate on the Indian continent, it's that you can't innovate within large manufacturing companies. And so that's where the idea came from. Myself and Kalyan was like, what if we did create a skunk works? What if we did have a company that had the space to operate and to work in the same way that European engineering consultancies are able to work, because they're then outside of the system and they have more space to do it. Let's do that, and let's do that in India. For personal reasons, because my family was located in the UK, I was keen to open up the UK office as well. But that gave us then access to maybe more emerging technology and materials, etc., because higher value products being on the doorstep of Aston Martin, Jaguar, Formula One teams, etc. There's a really good infrastructure around the UK for emerging engineering, whereas in India it's more focused on production and delivery. It's like, well, hey, aren't those two things really well suited to each other? If we've got a foot in both camps, instead of coming up with concepts which then are criticised because they're not manufacturing focused, they can't be made. We've got foot in the manufacturing camp, plus we've got access to new and emerging technologies and materials. Let's work together across these two locations and build a team that has the space to innovate, but knows how to productionize as well. So that was the dream behind making that company, was not just leveraging the traditional strengths, but also creating a culture and environment where people can innovate and try things. And that was the motivation behind doing it. So myself and Callian discussed that. And our background, we're both the chassis engineers, so that was our initial focus. But then a third partner, Amelia, joined us. She was from Bosch with DC motors and motor control and simulation background. And then that then completed the piece. So we not only can make a good rolling chassis, we also have the skill set or the leadership within the team to build a team that we can work with to do the power electronics and the control. So that's where the dream came from. The holy grail of this kind of restriction-free engineering heaven, where we can access all of these influences and make the best.
You said freedom to innovate. That's
for sure.
Freedom to innovate.
Hey, Tom, what do you see the advantages working between two such different markets and cultures, between the UK and India? What do you see? I mean, we know that India is the largest motorcycle market in the world, right? So, what have you taken from that in regards to being able to kind of concentrate on completely two different markets?
Well, I believe quite a lot in the perils of groupthink. So if you get a bunch of European, British, American motorcycle designers, we've all gone through the same school system. We've gone to very similar colleges. We've been influenced by the same bikes. We have maybe the same hobbies and experience. So when we look at a project, we're referencing the same products as potential solutions. We're referencing the same experience. So we kind of come up with the same solutions. When you're working with people who've had a very different bringing in, a different culture, different school system, different education system, exposure to different history of products and a different way of fixing them, you get completely different ideas.
That makes sense.
And when you put those two sets of ideas together, there's going to be pros and cons of each, but it can give you the opportunity to cherry pick and hopefully get just the pros. And so it gives you access to new solutions and new ways of doing things. So I think that's there's definitely strength in diversity. So I think as a small company, not just picking everyone, this guy thinks like me, I like him, I want him to join our team. I think it's good to have people with different backgrounds and experiences that deliberately don't think like you, because then they'll challenge maybe some of the things you think are a given and can't be changed, and maybe they could. So I think that's the biggest advantage in having a diverse team. I think the benefit of having teams in those different locations is because of those cultural differences that take a lifetime to learn. It's I think Indian companies prefer doing business with other Indian companies in the same way that European and British companies find it easier to do business with British and European companies. So for our major clients, which are located in UK, Europe, America, the front of house is like the UK office. Culturally, it's easier for us to negotiate, speak, have meetings, and get the project really working. But likewise, it works better for the Indian clients to be dealing with the Indian team because of all of those aspects. And that's not a negative. I think it's just it's easier when you literally speak the same language to build a rapport with a client and understand what their needs are. And you're in that market, you understand what the customer needs are. So it just makes it much easier. There's no lost in translation in between it. So I think that's quite key for us. And as we look to grow the business going forwards, that's a model that we want to repeat, where we see large motorcycle markets and development of new products. We'd like to have an office there. We'd like to have a team dealing with that market directly, and then working with the core teams in the UK and India to develop those products. But having that local feel to the company by being directly in those markets.
For sure.
That's a game changer. So Coexlion does a lot, from concept and validation to production and even training. If you were to sit down with a buddy over a pint, how would you explain what you do? What's your elevator pitch?
What's the elevator pitch? Yeah, so we
Or
want
the
to
pint
be a
pitch.
solution. Yeah, we want to be a solution provider, not a manpower provider. So I think a lot of companies will see external consultancies for like, okay, we've got a shortage of 2 people. Let's bring in 2 people from that company. And we support companies in that way. But I think where we really see ourselves is when somebody has a problem they don't know how to solve, or they don't have that skill, or they don't want to build that department within them. So you're working with a company, maybe they have a legacy product and they want to change the way it performs. They want to access a different customer segment. They want to go faster or have a longer range. So they give a very top level, we want this kind of solution. And then what we're able to do is to break that down from a wish into engineering requirements. We can then come up with concepts. Cool. We can test those concepts. We can prototype those things. They can try it out, see if they like it. And then we can take it through all the way to production. So what we want to be is a solution provider. So what the problem is, we can provide a solution to it. So what we aspire to do, or what our desired problem statement is, we don't have a product in this segment. We'd like you to take care of designing this product, like an outsourced R&D. And all the bits and the skill sets we don't have within our team, we have within our network. So like the styling and aesthetic design, we work with many independent consultants in UK and India who can provide that, and we can manage that. So we really, for our client, they can give us a brief and leave us alone, and then we'll come back with a productionizable motorcycle product for that, including the liaising with the supplier base, the vendor base, find companies that can provide those components globally in order to make that happen. So that's how I would pitch it.
So of your clients, have you had any startups?
Yes. I have to be careful as to what names I can mention. So it's probably best
you don't have to drop names. I'm just curious if you mainly have established large companies, or if you actually get to empower the dreamers, because that's pretty darn cool.
And to be honest, it's quite nice because we get to work across both. So we're working with established OEMs, working with some recognized brands as additional resource to them, or they're like, hey, can you work on this frame, or we've got a special edition of this vehicle that's going to have billet machine, this and this, so we'll design those kind of bits.
Cool, okay.
But that's working within an established system. We're also working with startup clients both in Europe and in India, where they don't have those systems in place. They are building all of those things as well. So it's as much
that's cool.
advisor maybe on systems as it is on actually designing the product.
That's really
cool.
It's
really diverse, and it is actually been as diverse as working on like stand-up ride sharing scooters, so very small electric 2-wheelers, doing in-market data logging, understanding how they road inputs from abuse things like jumping over speed breakers and riding downstairs. How does that actually load up that scooter? So how can you analyze it? Because a lot of these products have, in Europe, like safety standards they have to pass, but actually the safety standards don't really bear any relevance to how they're being used in the market. And people think, well, if I pass the safety standards, I've got a good product. But actually there's some aspects of the way you use that product that are completely untested. And they certainly don't look at the durability or the ride and handling characteristics of these sort of small products. They're just merely looking at the minimum possible level of acceptance. They're not giving you a quality product. So we've looked at those micro scooters. We've done work with bicycle companies. Obviously, there's lots of bicycle companies looking at electrification. Then the higher speeds, higher performance, bigger loads onto the chassis, etc. So working with them to analyze that, do data logging and see how that works. And then we've also done some electric 4-wheeler work as well. So not so much cars are a thing on their own, but when we're talking about the quadricycle segment, So, which is increasingly promoted segment of vehicles for urban deliveries who don't need a van capable of 100 miles an hour if you're just delivering parcels locally. So a four-wheeler, but a lightweight four-wheeler is a growth segment. We also do work in that because the engineering is very similar to two-wheelers. So it's very diverse, and that makes it very interesting when we're coming to work every day because we get to work on different types of products, from batteries, motor controllers, DC-DC converters. The teams have done. There's a bit of software, firmware code that we're doing in India as well, as well as then through to the more sort of traditional motorcycle chassis stuff, which is my sort of bread and butter.
Let me ask you this, just a quick question, follow up before I go into the next one. We're going back into the safety features. You have found yourself in different avenues, from some of the larger companies in the world to startups and now to your own thing. Are you finding that the safety features are pretty standard across the board, or are some a little bit more lenient than others? I mean, what have you seen? You don't need to explain step by step, but just like, what have you seen through your experiences?
I think in the Western Europe, USA markets, the regulations sort of pretty much tie up the safety. If you are making a product that has to be sold, you're going to meet those regulations, and then you have to make a safe product. So I think there aren't really any differences between OEMs and startups, because we have to achieve those standards, and then by default the vehicle is safe. India is actually developing on the safety standards very rapidly. So in the time that I've been in there since 2015, they've matched with the automatic headlights on regulations, so for better visibility of bikes, and they've added advanced braking, so you have to either give link brakes or ABS brakes in India. So India is not far behind. So you may traditionally think, well, that's a market where safety isn't taken seriously, but it is. And the Indian companies themselves are more and more benchmarking against European companies, because they're competing on a global scale, and so they are very well aware of the global safety standards. I think the regions that are lagging behind a little bit are places like the Middle East, Africa. They don't have such strict regulations, but all of the companies that I've worked at that are exporting into those markets have made the decision to meet, where possible, the higher safety standards of the Europe or Indian standards, rather than sort of going to the cheapest possible solution that would work. Just because it's not legislated against doesn't mean it's not it's okay to do that.
Yeah,
and I think there's
sense.
Also benefits from building a more global level of conformity, because that opens up other markets too if you want to export, and also it gives you a product advantage over your incumbent manufacturers who are maybe building legacy products that are 30 years old, that have very basic drum brakes. If you're offering a disc brake vehicle, it's better. It's a better.
Absolutely.
It's a reason to buy the new product. So you're helping sell that. So yeah, I think I did quite a bit of work on looking at electric scooter fires in India, because there was quite a lot of negative press towards electric two-wheelers because of some battery fires that occurred, and got a lot of press. But if you actually look at the statistics for the number of electric vehicle fires versus the non-publicized petrol vehicle fires, they're no more risky. And the reason why the electric vehicle fires, some of the electric vehicle fires are actually house fires that have been caused by charging an electric vehicle because of a lack of building regulations and safety controls around the buildings, without proper fusing, without proper protected circuits, without proper earthing. And when you put a lot of strain on that electric system, because you're now high current draw from an electric vehicle, actually that can be the cause. Yeah, and I think a lot of the tragic accidents where people have perished in those fires, you could point the finger towards building regulations and having proper fire escapes and smoke alarms, etc. So it looks worse in emerging markets like India for the outcome to those fires, because the other then related safety aspects are maybe not as mature.
Right.
So, for example, there would be a shop with charging numerous electric vehicles or storing a large number of electric vehicles, but that shop will be within a building with only a single fire escape through the shop. So if there is a fire, the people are then trapped in the building, whereas that situation wouldn't occur in Europe. Certainly, I can't speak for the US, but you wouldn't be allowed to have a residential building on top of an industrial unit without like fire insulation, without a separate fire escape. So I think it's all of those kind of things which are not related to the vehicles that actually are making the situation appear worse than whereas in fact there's no. I don't think the number of electrical fires on vehicles, when I looked at the statistics about 2 years ago, it was no worse in India, but the fires were getting more press coverage and therefore seeming worse because the outcomes were worse because of these other factors.
Cool.
It's definitely in the UK, the issue is more around non-vehicle electric fires, things like electric scooters, like micro scooters and the hoverboards, those kind of things. They're now banned on all of the London transport network.
Wow.
Because those are not there. Yeah, because of the risk of fire. Those products are governed under consumer product regulations and not vehicle regulations. And sometimes the power, the energy stored in those batteries is not dissimilar to a vehicle, a lightweight vehicle, but they're not governed by the same regulations because they're not categorized as vehicles. So there is a greater level of safety on vehicles than there is on products. The product regulations are really designed around mobile phones and smartwatches and small battery items, but when you've got an electric micro scooter, the batteries then become quite big and potential to do harm. So that is the area which I perceive as having the highest risk, is especially unregulated things like electric conversion kits of bicycles. They're quite an unregulated space, and then they're fitted by DIY engineers and making their own choices on BMS control and charging speed, etc. And I think that where a lot of the headlines of lithium-ion fire is coming from kind of product.
Hey guys, the show will be back in 1 minute right after a word from our sponsor.
Hey, One Gang, tired of feeling like your butt's taking more of a beating than your bike on those long rides? Introducing Butt Buffer, the ultimate solution to saddle soreness. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cushions are made from medical-grade viscoelastic polymer, scientifically crafted to eliminate pressure points and keep your circulation flowing. No more numb nuts or numb butts. And here's the best part. Butt Buffer cushions are made right here in the US for the last 30 years. From Harleys to Hondas, we've got a cushion to fit your ride perfectly. Plus, with styles ranging from sleek pebble polymer to luxurious sheepskin, there's a Butt Buffer for every rider's style. Get your Butt Buffer today at buttbuffer.com. That's buttbuffer.com. Your butt will thank you, and you'll ride longer and happier. We've got your butt covered.
Tom, let me ask you this. Let's dig in. Let's dig in a little bit into the EV motorcycle world. From your seat, what's really happening right now that people don't see yet, and what's the energy like behind the scenes?
Well, I think what we witnessed in India over the past 5 years really is a very quick switch in the scooter market for sort of urban mobility, commuters popping down to the shops type vehicles, switching over to EV without a lot of government incentive. This was consumer led.
Can you guys hear me okay?
Because they provide a better and more convenient solution. Instead of having to go to the fuel station and fill up with fuel, you never have to do that because you're always charging at home. It's always ready to go. So it's very convenient. So I see that use case perhaps being then multiplied across other locations. I think smaller capacity electric scooters that you can ride on a car license without needing a specific bike license are very accessible, low cost, and convenient in urban areas which now are more and more carrying congestion charges for cars or like pollution zones, etc. Where I think that is going to be the growth space. As we see consumers picking up the electric vehicles, I think the other area is in the last mile delivery. So we've all changed the way that we shop. We're all getting everything delivered now. So yes, we're getting our weekly groceries delivered by a van because we're getting kilos and kilos of product brought in. But more and more we're looking for, well, I forgot that vital ingredient when I'm cooking my dinner. So do I want to pop out to the shop and get it, or do I just want to go on an app and get someone to bring it to me for a nominal fee? So I think more and more we're looking at that kind of instant gratification of not just ordering stuff online and then waiting for it to be delivered. We're now wanting that to be quicker and quicker. Like, I've broken my phone. I want a new phone, but I don't want to go out to the shops. I want it to come to my house. Those kind of small deliveries, which are sort of very local, the best way to deliver them is on a motorbike. You don't need to worry about parking. You're not going to get stuck in traffic, etc. So I think we're already seeing that shift in big urban areas. It becomes more challenging when you have more suburbia and the distances are longer. You need more battery range. But I see that being an area that really grows the industry, is not direct to consumer, but is businesses wanting to deliver efficiently. Two-wheelers are a great solution for that. And as we said before, I think we're a little way off performance and leisure motorcycles going electric, because of the challenge of what makes your bike great is that you can ride to the horizon if you want to and fill up at a gas station. You know you're going to find it. You're not limited. You don't even need to plan ahead where you're going to ride. You just ride and you find somewhere to fill up and you go. And you know, I do that in India. Like at weekends, I want to go escape the city, go out to the hills. I've run an electric scooter in India, but I can't take that on that journey. I'm going to get 20 kilometers outside of the city and then be stressed. And where am I going to charge? So for that, you still need to use a petrol bike. And I think we're quite a long way off that being replaced in that segment. But I think embrace that. I mean, have your petrol bike for the weekend rides, the weekend trip with your mates or the holiday. But for a lot of people, we're not using the bikes every day like that. And I think and it's a big if these days, we don't know exactly how the industry is going to go, but if the four-wheeler industry does switch away from petrol to electric, there will come a time when you're like, well, great, I've got my old heritage Ducati 999, but where am I going to get fuel from it? And yes, synthetic fuels exist, but how expensive are they going to be and how readily available is it going to be? Is it going to be a case that you can ride off and fill it up anywhere? Or is it going to be, I'm going to take it to the track and ride it there because I know they've got a synthetic fuel station there. So I think that might change the use. And I think when that happens, hopefully for us bikers, the technology would have caught up and we've got real viable alternatives for electric bikes. And we can charge them very quickly at car charging stations, and we can go on adventures that are electric powered. Cool. But I think really we'll see most movement for electric two-wheelers in the small bike space where the batteries are smaller. And it's not just sensible commuting vehicles and delivery vehicles, but we've seen it with things like the free ride from KTM and the popularity of things like Surons, etc. for leisure riding off trails, etc. I think it will become preferred to use an electric bike for that because there's less maintenance. You can maybe charge up a couple of spare battery packs if you're doing loops from a car park, trails in the woods or whatever. You can quickly swap the battery and extend that range. I think that's very possible. So I think that's what we'll see is from the smaller end of the market will gradually, because of customer demand, turn to electric. And then when the top end of the market is forced to go electric because of the lack of petrol, hopefully the technology is caught up then and we have a viable alternative, and then we will see that.
And we're sort of touching on it now, but there is a lot of buzz around battery tech with swappable packs, like you mentioned, and regenerative braking, all those things. What tech on the horizon are you most excited about and think is the most promising?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's a cell technology that we touched on briefly before, seeing the cell cost coming down and the ability to charge and discharge more quickly. I think that's good. There's some really exciting, there's some really neat advances we've seen already, like There's companies that use magnetic fields to help control the dendrite growth within the cells as you're charging. It allows you to charge faster without them heating up. So there's some really cool stuff that's out there. It's just that technology becoming mature enough that it's cheap enough to put onto a production bike, and it's not just a sort of
viable
a special thing. And I think in the world of chassis, what we will see is lightweighting becoming more and more important, because the challenge with electric vehicles is that they are heavy, and then that weight, it kills the range and the performance. But there's a renewed focus on trying to make the chassis better and lighter to compensate for a heavier powertrain. And when we're looking at motorcycles, always, throughout our career, if we can see the technology that's coming towards us. If you look at military, space and aerospace applications, those kind of materials and developments then come into things like Formula One, sports car racing. Then we'll see them in your Lamborghinis and your Ferraris and McLarens on the road. Then you'll see them in your premium Audis and your S-Class Merc.
Right.
Then you'll start seeing them in your more sort of everyday cars like your Hondas, your GMs, your Fords. Then you start seeing them coming into value cars. When they're hitting the kind of value car range, that's when that technology becomes accessible for your mass-produced motorbikes. When that technology is there in supercars, it's there in your high-end bikes, your MV Augustas, your Ducatis. But you can see it coming. So we're not expecting a new thing we've never heard of to be the next development in motorcycles. What we need to do, looking into the future and see, well, what are they using in Formula One cars now? What are they putting into your Ferraris now? When are we going to see those? So we've seen that happen. You now can buy a $500 bike in India with an LED headlamp. When we were working at Triumph, an LED headlamp's $1,000 on cost per bike.
Damn.
So it just wasn't going to happen. And now you're getting it as a feature on a bike that costs half the cost. And it's just the volumes that LEDs are made in has driven the cost down, and the technology's improved. LED headlamps were fitted on supercars, I don't know, probably 20 years ago. So we can just see it coming. So for me, advanced materials, advanced manufacturing processes like 3D printing rather than traditional subtractive or manufacturing processes are replacing
question
that,
about
allowing
that.
Optimized parts.
Just to interrupt you really quick, you mentioned lightweighting, and now you're getting into the 3D printing. And what do you think about generative design? Do you think it's going to become more prevalent as we move forward, potentially with OEMs, or do you think that it's more of a fine, a smaller project item, or do you think that it can actually translate to chassis in the future?
No, I think you can, and I think we're seeing that already. So we worked with one OEM. Again, I'm not sure based on confidentiality what I can say, but did a special project to make an electric bike, and the frame design was led by Generative Design with their in-house team. It's not work that we did. But what it gives you is let's say an inspiration. It gives you quite a messy CAD model that maybe can't be manufactured. And although the software says, well, put in manufacturing constraints, we'll consider those. So you can get it a bit closer. But generally what I find the most use for that is it will inspire you and help you see where the structure needs to be. Then you can go and design something, work with the product stylist who make it look beautiful. But say, when you're making this look nice, make sure you're putting material thick through here and thin through here. So it gives you a kind of reference of what does ideal look like. And then you can design with that already in mind, rather than what we say is we put your FEA goggles on and you look at it and you try and see where the stress is going. Well, this actually lets you do that. So I think it is already being used and providing inspiration. So I hope we're a little bit away from AI saying, well, this is the ideal design part, and it uses generative design to just produce it. Yeah, I think and AI can probably lead that and give great inspiration, but I think you need a good vehicle stylist to make it look beautiful and a good design engineer to make it work well. But yeah, definitely, I think it is. And we, as you know, I did the Formula Student, and something we really believe in. We sponsor the the Indian Formula Student competition, because I think it gives the engineers the great skills that they need. And in that kind of unconstrained world there, I've seen great work from colleges in India and in the UK where they use generative design to design structural components, and then they use 3D printing to make those, so they have no constraints over the manufacturing process dictating the form, and then come up with some really nice optimized structures which are super lightweight with the material exactly where you need it. So I think that is a potential development, is using that tech in a way that helps us change what we think of the traditional shapes. It helps us challenge that traditional thinking and do something a bit different. And if we pair that with their new manufacturing processes, we can make some big changes in that. The only thing we have to be careful of with all of these things, is if you put the wrong load cases in, if you don't understand what loads are actually acting on it, it will optimize it perfectly to the wrong set of loads, so it still won't work. So there's still some knowledge and understanding that needs to be there. It won't design it for you.
Tom, let me ask you this, from your experience, from the global perspective, who's pushing innovations the hardest right now? Are there certain regions or companies leading the way that we should be kind of paying attention a little bit more to?
And I think the startup products that have come out of India, so like the likes of the Olas and the Aethers, I think they've really pushed the game forwards as to like the integrated tech that you can get on that. I think the petrol bike industry was happy to have an instrument, and they would go to a TFT screen to show graphically that information in a fascinating way, but it wasn't particularly high tech. It was just the same data presented in a more aesthetic fashion. But with these electric startup companies, which are offering you a bike for maybe $1,500, so they're not super expensive products, but they are giving you true integration with that technology. So companion apps with route planning. When I first took a test ride on my Aether scooter in India, when you came back from the test ride, the salesman's showing you on his iPad how fast you were riding everywhere, what lean angle you went to, what G you were pulling. And this is on a $1,500 scooter.
Right.
So it's offering you a load more tech, and they're coming up with sort of new ideas, new ways to interact with it, and really pushing it forwards from a tech perspective. So I think the vehicle has become a platform on which you can sell a kind of software-driven experience, which is, for an old guy like me, is maybe not something that I fully embrace, because I just want to ride the bike and have that feeling. But I think especially for the younger generation, a product they can interact with on an app when they're not even riding, and they can swap stats and data with other people, I think is exactly a different way of experiencing the product. So I think that's in India, that's a great place for that to happen. Obviously been seen for many years as the IT outsourcing hub of the world. So loads of great software engineers and talent there. Pulling them together with vehicle engineers, I think, is the right place to do that. And I think there's more chance for innovation in that area happening in India than there is perhaps in Europe and the UK, where we're perhaps not as software engineering heavy as out in India and stuff. So I think, in terms of that kind of innovation, I think it's coming in that area. I think it's very challenging for EV startups at the moment. I think it was the fashion for people to invest in EV startups maybe 10 years ago, but with companies like Arc and Arrival struggling, I think it's hard to get that investment, which is a shame, because I think startups have a really important place in the industry to drive that innovation, because they kind of have to, but they're also free from the shackles of doing things a traditional way. So I think a healthy bike industry has these startup companies innovating and pushing new things. And it's important that is supported with the investment community, whether that's governments or private investors or OEMs themselves, because I think that's a good place to see the innovation coming through.
Gotcha.
And finally, I'm obviously, I'm a big motorsport fan, and I think the world of motorsport is also a great place for innovating. I know a lot of people were dead against Formula One going away from the V10s down to the V6 hybrid, but actually by regulating and making them look at this technology, it pushes the development of electric vehicles, energy harvesting, in a way that the consumer-facing industry is just not going to do. And, maybe
Right.
they'll change the regulations back to V20 and it will seem like that's all gone to waste, but it won't be, because all of that knowledge and all of that data, all of that IP has been developed.
Point.
That's now ready to filter down into the car world and into the bike world So I think there's also a role to be played to make motorsport not just an entertainment, but actually have a useful incubator space for technology that could be useful for all of us.
That's a great point. All right, what's your honest take? Is it 5 years? Is it 2 years, 10 years until electric motorcycles are mainstream? Or are there bigger barriers behind the scenes, in your opinion, that are going to delay it further?
So I think it will be different in different parts of the world because people use bikes differently. So I think
Sure.
we will see electric bikes being the norm for most people in Asia and in East Africa, etc., pretty soon. I think within 5 years that will be the kind of the default. But I think there will be then a community of people in India, for example, that buy bikes because they're bikers and they love bikes. They will probably stick to their 400cc, 500cc motorbikes because they want to be free to ride out the city, ride up the hills, and get away from it all on their bike, which is why a lot of us love biking. So really, I think the changeover will be on, do you ride a bike because it's your best transport solution? It's better than a bus. You're going to get stuck in traffic in a car, or a car's too expensive to run. Those guys, they're already better off an electric bike than a petrol bike. So I think that has already shifted in those markets. But if you're riding a motorbike because of the performance or the freedom or that feeling you just don't get when you're riding a car, I just don't think the technology supports it. Now, I would probably say, oh, that's 10 years off, but I think technology is moving so fast that it could surprise us. It could be less than that because these better batteries, the cost could come down. So it could shift that way. Plus, I also think that actually the way that people who love bikes, using bikes, are actually migrating towards smaller bikes anyway. I think just maybe the new people are getting into biking, that they're not all about the Hayabusas with the loads of power and straight line speed. More about smaller bikes and enjoying the ride for that. And I think those smaller bikes will be the first ones to change. So maybe the customer base is moving towards the area where the EV bikes can perform. And I think then we have the unknown external factor of government policy, etc. So we all thought that by 2030 we'd all be in electric cars in Europe, but now governments are pedaling, Trump's backpedaling away from these commitments, and so you just don't know anymore. You don't know what's going to happen. If it flips, we get different governments, different people in charge. They might just say, no, we're banning petrol for cars, in which case we're going to be scrabbling to make fun electric bikes to fill that gap. So I'm much more confident about small bikes, bikes for delivery, bikes for commuting in heavily urban areas. It just makes sense, and they're better as electric than they are as petrol. So I think we're already there. But using a bike because you're a bike guy and that's your thing, you're having to not just change people's like practical thinking brain. You've got to change their hearts, right, to make them want to fall in love with this electric bike. And I think that's harder.
Yeah, for sure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Hey, where can
just hit the open road?
Where can people find you? How can our listeners or anybody out there get a hold of you if they need you? Where are you on social media most active?
So I think LinkedIn's the best place to find us. So Coexlion, the company, has a LinkedIn page. I've also got a LinkedIn page. I think it's Tom Lewellyn, CNG, on there for me. We have
We're going to link
Instagram,
that to the show notes.
And we have an Instagram channel, but we're not as active on that as we are on LinkedIn, etc. And obviously there's our website. You can come and have a look at the website too.
That's awesome, man. Well, man, this has been amazing. What a education. You can tell how passionate you are about what you're doing, man. So it's awesome for us to hear, because we've had guests from the EV world, from Trevor Motorcycles to other individuals who've come in and out of this industry. And it's been really educational on the engineering side coming from you, because you have your own company and you help other brands and companies move forward with their dreams and visions. So it's been awesome to hear So, are you ready for the speed round? That's the next thing. So we get a chance to get your quirky side a little bit. So,
Yeah.
all right, cool.
All right, you ready for the speed round?
Yeah, as ready as I'll ever be, I think.
All right, I'll put
All right,
2
cool.
minutes on the clock.
All right. First question's off script. We're gonna have to restart the 2 minutes. Have you gotten to ride the Enduro, the new Triumph Enduros yet, or seen them?
No, I haven't ridden one of the enduros. But the fact that Jake, our team lead, he was heavily involved in that project when he worked at Triumph.
Oh,
So
cool.
yeah, we're desperate to get our hands on one.
That's a cool bike.
Yes, me too. I want to meet somebody who's ridden one. I'm dying to get on one of those. Okay, now we start the 2 minutes. All right, first question: tea or coffee, and how many cups a day?
Coffee and too many to count, I think.
All right, go.
All right, what's something you pack in your bag no matter where you're going?
Swimming shorts.
Nice.
Good call. Prepared. All right. If you weren't an engineer, what profession do you think you'd be in right now?
That's a standard interview question that we used to have at Triumph, and you're not allowed to answer not engineer. I don't know. Racing driver. There you go.
Racing driver. All right, cool.
There
cool,
you
cool.
go. Filling those childhood dreams. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
Best
An
motorcycle you've ever
unsuccessful one,
owned,
I
or
Now you'd be
Best
a
motorcycle
good
I've
one.
be having fun. though.
You'd be a good one, I think.
Yeah, but it's actually best motorcycle you've ever owned or ridden.
Oh, best. Most fun I've had on a bike is actually my X-Pulse 150 in India. It's got the rally kit on, and that's my first sort of off-road bike. So just that ability to just ride at something and go over it is
That's cool.
landscape, not people, is it's really good fun. So I think that's the most fun I've had on
And
on a bike.
the Royal Enfield's that's the king of India, isn't it?
Yeah, that's right. So you've got to ride a sort of bullet if you go to India, but it's maybe not the best riding experience. I hesitate to say.
Okay.
It's,
All right.
but yeah, it's definitely part of the experience.
Oh, absolutely.
Cool. All right. If you could only own one motorcycle, are you looking at fuel injected, carbureted, or electric?
Probably fuel injected.
Cool. All right. Biggest pet peeve in the motorcycle industry?
Too much power. I think that feeling that power is everything. Like driven like 1200 cc monsters, and maybe it's down to my riding ability, but that didn't make the ride experience better for me. Just made the bike heavier. Didn't enjoy it as much. Couldn't use the power. And actually more fun on a 400 cc KTM than on a 1200 cc bike. So I think that more is more is not always true for bikes.
Good one.
Nice. All right. Who's someone dead or alive that you'd love to sit and have a pint with?
Valentino Rossi.
Wow, man.
Nice.
Dude, like,
He's coming out of the
it's
woodwork.
crazy. I'll tell you, man. Everybody from Europe that we've had on this show has chosen him. It was like
Really?
99% of the time. No matter where you are from
Yeah.
around the world, everybody says Valentino Rossi. It's crazy.
I just think
We need
he'd
to
be a
have
good
him on the
laugh,
show.
and he'd have some good stories, and it would
Oh my
definitely
God.
need more than just one pint.
Oh, yeah. He's something special for sure.
So in general, are you more likely to overthink or just wing it?
I think my wife would say wing it, so I have to answer that truthfully. I'd like to think
Cool.
I overthink it, but I think the reality is not.
That's awesome.
All right, your playlist is stuck on one artist. Who do you hope it is?
Probably the Prodigy.
Prodigy. Okay. All right. Get some old school.
Yeah,
Is
I
that
am old
so?
school. I didn't,
Is
yeah,
Sorry.
my
Prodigy
kids
like
introduced me
the-
to new music. Otherwise, it's stuck on 90s for me.
Are we thinking about the same thing, like Breathe Prodigy, or is
Yeah.
this some other
Yeah.
band?
Yeah.
No, that band.
Okay.
And yeah,
Diesel Power. That album was crazy. That other song on that track. All right. Best advice you've ever received that you still follow today?
God, I don't think I've ever listened to anyone's advice, which is probably what gets me into trouble. Yeah, I don't know. I can't. I'd have to skip that question. I can't think.
All right. No
There's
worries.
probably lots of good
All right,
advice
we
I
can-
should
we
have
can
followed.
come-
That's probably an easier question to answer.
All right. Next question is, what's a totally random skill or hobby that you have and love that people wouldn't expect?
I like drawing. Yeah, so doing like artworks and stuff. I don't do it much these days, but I once won a prize at our local village show for
Nice.
a picture of an Indy car. So yeah,
Cool.
I think that's probably surprising
You,
that I
do
can
you,
sit
you
still
still
and do
you still have that picture? You still have that picture?
that. I think my dad's got it up in his office at home.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, I
That's
used to
cool.
like to do pictures of that.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we used to watch the Indy cars, and Dario Franchitti was doing well at the time. So it was a Dario Franchitti picture.
Nice.
Very cool. All right. Early mornings or late nights? When do you do your best thinking?
Actually, both. I find I do my worst thinking in the middle of the day, and either get up early and smash it out, and it's good there, or coffee powered after dinner, get locked in and get it done there. I find the middle of the day is the worst time to do work, just full of distractions and hard to get a clear run at things. So
Right.
that's a cheat answer, but both.
Gotcha. All right. Here's a tricky one. What's one thing that always makes you laugh, whether it's a show, a person, or a comedian? What's your laugh button?
And probably favorite comedian is Eddie Izzard. I don't know if you guys know him in the
All right.
States.
Yeah,
but,
we know. Yep, of course.
Yeah. So I think
Yeah,
that would have to be
Not
my
as big
go-to.
over
But
here, but
Yeah, he's funny.
Yeah.
yeah.
all right. Biggest culture shock moment you've had when visiting another country?
This was when I was working India. We'd done a 2-day training course and we'd finished a little bit earlier. And the trainer said, would anyone, we've got a few minutes, anyone like to ask a question? And one guy got up and he said, can Vikas sing a song? And the trainer was like, yeah, okay. This guy Vikas just stood up and sung a song at the end of the
No
training.
kidding.
which
That's
was,
funny.
I thought that's never happened to me in Europe.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I just thought
Okay,
here
last
things are a bit
question.
different, which is cool.
It is cool. It's good to get those experiences, and it's really good to get your kids out to get those experiences
absolutely,
too, to
man.
get some
Oh,
more
yeah,
culture
definitely.
than what you're stuck around all the time. All right, so finish the sentence. At the end of the day, I'm just a guy who loves.
Fast things.
All right.
Good answer.
And you can say what those things are, like, you can leave that to your own
Yeah, but that's
interpretation.
cool because you started the show like that, talking about the fast things that intrigued you, and you finished the show saying, I'm just a guy who loves fast things. So obviously, man, your passion has carried you. You know, that's what's beautiful about having you learning not only about your experience, but just being able to see how much you really love this moto world, whether it's 4 wheels or 2 wheels, how much you give back and how much you constantly think about it. So it's been our pleasure to get you on the show for sure, man. You're extremely knowledgeable and a phenomenal. Your business and what you're doing. We wish you nothing but success for the future. And if you ever come to the States, man, you look us up. We both live in Florida, so we'll take you out here, show you
I'd
around.
love to.
Thanks, Tom. Lots of cool
Thank you very
information. It
much.
was a really good episode. We appreciate you.
Yeah, super good episode.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I've enjoyed it. Always like talking, so it's good.
All right, Tom.
All right,
thanks,
thanks very
buddy.
much.
All right, take care.
You have a great
Yeah,
rest of
thank
your
you.
week, okay?